Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello learners, I am Dr. Rekha Sharma, retired Professor UGC Human Resource Development Center, Rashtrasant Tukaroji Maharaj Nagpur University, Nagpur. In this video, we shall study cereals, structure, composition and milling. Now objectives of this video are, after studying this module, the learners will be able to enumerate different cereals. They will be able to explain the structure of cereals. They will be able to discuss the composition of cereals and will be able to describe the milling of cereals. Cereals are among the first plants to be domesticated by humans during the early times. The Egyptian, Greek and Roman civilizations used wheat and barley as their major food source. India, China and Japan depend on rice as well as wheat for their daily food. The word cereal has been derived from the Cerealia Munera, which means gift of Ceres, the Roman goddess of grain, harvest and agriculture. She was worshipped by the farmers and the people of Rome. A festival called Cerealia honored the goddess each year from April 12 to April 19. Later, these were identified as plants with small grains and named cereals. The grains of wheat and barley became the major part of the offerings given to God by Romans. The festival called Baisakhi, 13th of April in northern India, is also associated with agriculture, and the first grain harvested is offered to God. Cereals are the members of grass family Poaceae and are grown for their starchy seeds. Cereals were used for food by popping or parching the grain. Later, the grains were ground into coarse meal, which, when soaked in water, made porridge. Baked cakes or bread appeared later in the course of time. The term cereals refers to members of Poaceae, formerly called Gramineae grass family, and determines 9 species: wheat, rye, barley, oat, rice, millet, corn, sorghum and triticale, which is a hybrid of wheat and rye. Rye and oats are dominantly used in the colder regions near the North Pole. Wheat and barley are consumed as major cereals in warm, temperate regions, while maize and millets predominate in tropical regions. Cereals such as wheat, rice or maize form the staple food of about a quarter of the world's population. Barley, oats, rye, sorghum and millets together make up staple food for the rest of the world. Now wheat. Wheat is a grass widely cultivated for its wheat, a cereal grain which is a worldwide staple food. There are many species of wheat which together make up the genus Triticum. The most widely grown is common wheat. Wheat grain have either a dark orange-brown appearance or a light yellowish color. Wheat belongs to the genus Triticum and there are 30,000 species. The wheat produced in the country belongs to Triticum aestivum 95%, Triticum durum 4% and Triticum dicoccum 1%. Rice. Rice is one of the leading crops of the world, maize, corn and wheat being the other two. There are about 10,000 varieties of rice in the world. The Asian continent dominates in terms of global rice production. China and India are leading producers of rice. More than 3.5 billion of the world's population use rice as their staple food. This accounts for about half of the people living in the world. Now, maize. Maize is another crop widely cultivated throughout the world. The United States of America produces 40% of the world's harvest. Other maize producing countries include China, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, India, France, and Argentina. Corn or maize, a cereal cultivated in most warm areas of the world, has many varieties. The corn kernel is large with a high embryo content, and corn oil extracted from the germ is commercially valuable. The portions of corn, like those of most cereals other than wheat, do not provide elastic gluten. Barley. Barley can be cultivated on poorer soil and at lower temperatures than wheat. An important characteristic of barley is winter hardiness, which involves the ability to modify or withstand many types of stresses, particularly that of frost. However, barley is subject to many of the diseases and pests that affect wheat. The use of barley in animal feed is increasing. It has been a basic ingredient of pig foods for years and is increasingly used for cattle feed. Most of the barley grown in the world is used for animal feed, but a special pure barley is the source of malt for beer production. Barley is also used in the manufacture of vinegar, malt extract, some milk type beverages, and certain breakfast foods. In addition, in the flaked form, it is employed in some sections of the brewing industry, and pearl barley, that is skin removed by imri friction, is used in various cooking foods. Now, oats. Oats belong to the botanical genus Avena, which includes a large number of types, the principal being A. sativa, A. sterilis, and A. strigosa. Oats are widely grown in most countries but are not suitable for Mediterranean climates. Oats are frequently grown on farms as feed for farms' livestock. They are well balanced chemically with fairly high fat content and are particularly suitable for feeding horses and sheep. Although a large portion of the world's oat production is used for animal feed, oatmeal is a popular human food in many countries. Thin husked oats yield 60% of oatmeal. Varieties with thick husks yield only 50%. The rapid development of rancidity is a serial problem in oats and oat products. The free fatty acid content must be controlled because the formation of these acids tend to produce a soapy taste resulting from the activity of the enzyme lipase. A few minutes of steam treatment normally destroys the lipase activity in the grain. Now, rye. Rye is a type of cereal grain that belongs to the wheat family. This plant is native to the central and eastern regions of present-day Turkey. Archaeological evidence suggests that the plant has been cultivated since Neolithic era. It is grown in many regions around the world. Germany is the largest producer of rye, followed by Poland and Russia. Rye, which has been known for some 2000 years, ranks second to wheat as bread flour. The principal rye producers are Russia, Poland, Belarus, Germany, and Ukraine. The popularity of true rye bread is decreasing, and a similar bread retaining some of its original characteristics is now made from a rye and wheat blend. Rye bread, closer grained and heavier than wheat bread, is aerated by the use of a leaven, that is sourdough, rather than yeast. The grain is susceptible to attack by parasitic fungus, ergot. Now triticale. Triticale is a hybrid of wheat and rye, first bred in laboratories during the late 19th century in Scotland and Germany. The main growers of triticale are Germany, France, China, Australia, Hungary, and the USA, the biggest being Poland with over 1 million hectares. The main purpose of the crop worldwide is for food for the livestock. There are bread varieties of the triticale created, which are an appropriate addition to the wheat flour for the production of bread and bakery, as well as whole grains for cereals and triticale noodles. The newest usage of triticale is in as a raw material for biofuels. Now coming down to structure of cereal grains. The cereals vary in their grain size and weight. Their size and the average grain weight for 1000 grains are used in grading the cereals. The overall structure of all cereal grains is basically similar, differing from one cereal to another in detail only. In wheat, rye, common varieties of maize, and some varieties of sorghum and barley, the lemma and palea become free from the grain at threshing and form chaff. Thus, wheat, oats, maize, and sorghum are said to be naked grains called caryopsis. The seed comprises the seed coat, germ, and endosperm. In the case of rice, oats, some varieties of barley, and sorghum, the lemma and palea adhere to the grain and do not come away during threshing. Thus, these grains are covered or coated caryopsis. The bracts adhering to the grain constitute the hull or husk. The threshed rice with husk is known as paddy. Each of the main parts of the grain, pericarp, seed coat, germ, and endosperm, is further divided into various layers, tissues, and regions. Pericarp. The outer layer or epidermis of the cereals consists of thin-walled, long, rectangular cells. Next to the epidermis is the hypoderm of various thickness. The innermost layer of pericarp tears during the ripening of the seed, and in the mature grain they are represented by a layer of branching hypha-like cells known as tube cells. The pericarp of wheat is thin and papery, while the sorghum pericarp consists of several tissue layers, is pigmented, and the outer surface is covered with a waxy cuticle. Seed coat. The seed coat or testa is a thin single or double layer with the cellular structure almost obliterated. The inner layer of testa of wheat is often deeply pigmented, which gives the grain its characteristic color. Next to the testa is the hyaline layer, that is nucellar layer, which is colorless and devoid of any obvious cellular structure. Now, aileron layer. The endosperm is surrounded by one or more layers of cells known as aileron layer. Now, here you can see this is aileron layer. In wheat, the aileron is a single layer of thick-walled cubical cells and constitutes 7% of the grain by weight. The cells contain about 20% each of protein, oil and mineral matter and 10% of sugar, principally sucrose, neoketose and raffinose. The cells are also rich in nicotinic acid. The aileron cells also contain tiny grains of phytic acid with some protein. The aileron is 2 or 4 cell layers thick in barley, 2 or 3 layers thick in rice of the species indica, and 5 to 6 layers thick in the species of japonica. The cells are rectangular with thin cell walls. In rye, oats and sorghum, the aileron is a single layer of cells, and in maize it is generally a single layer, although a type of maize has 2 to 6 layers. The aileron layers generally surround only the starchy endosperm and seize where the latter abuts the scutellum. In rice, however, the aileron layer extends from the upper end of the embryo to its base. The aileron layer and all the covering external to it comprise the bran. Now, endosperm. The endosperm itself consists of cells of various sizes, shapes and different compositions. The endosperm cells consist mainly of starch and protein, the starch being in the form of spherical granules, which are single granules or tightly packed together and embedded in a matrix of protein. The size and shape of the starch granules in the endosperm cells vary from one cereal to another. The granules in wheat, rye, barley, maize and sorghum are simple, whereas those in rice are compound, that is up to 60 granules are compounded together. Oats contain both simple and compound grains, the former predominating. Now, embryo. The germ or embryo consists of many parts. It is separated from the endosperm by the scutellum, which has the function of mobilizing the stored food reserves in the endosperm and transmitting them to the embryo when the grain germinates. The germ and scutellum are rich in protein and fat, while most of the B vitamins in the grain are present in the scutellum. This is the composition of cereal grains. For whole wheat, rice, maize, barley, rye, oats, the energy content, carbohydrate, protein, total fat and total fiber content has been given here, shown here. Now we will be talking about these compositions in bit detail. Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the major constituents comprising about 80% of the dry matter of the cereals. The carbohydrates are customarily considered in two parts: the crude fiber, which is the portion of carbohydrate insoluble in dilute acids and alkalis under prescribed conditions, and the soluble carbohydrates, which are the remainder left after accounting for crude fiber, proteins, fat and mineral matter. The fiber constituents are cellulose, hemicellulose and pentosans. Of the soluble carbohydrates, starch is the most important carbohydrate in all cereals. Small quantities of dextrine and sugars are also present. Free sugars present include simple sugars such as glucose and galactose and oligosaccharides like sucrose, maltose and raffinose. The husked caryopsis of rice, barley and oats have a crude fiber content 2 to 5 times that of naked caryopsis. Removal of the husk of rice and oats during processing increases the protein content of the product. Dehusked rice is still comparatively low in protein content, but dehusked oats equal or exceed wheat in protein content. Now, protein. The protein content of different cereals varies, and that of rice is lower than that of all other cereals. The protein content of different varieties of the same cereal also varies. Proteins are found in all tissues of cereal grains, the higher concentration occurring in the embryo, scutellum and aileron layers than in the starchy endosperm, pericarp and testa. Within the endosperm, the concentration of protein increases from the center to the periphery. The types of proteins present in cereals are albumins, globulins, prolamins and glutelins. The proportions of these proteins differ in different cereals. The gliadins and glutelins are known as gluten proteins. They form with water and salt when a flour water dough is kneaded. Gluten has elasticity and flow properties of a unique value for the baking of bread and other products. The amino acid compositions of the proteins in the cereal grains vary. They are generally low in the content of lysine. The biological value of the proteins in germ and aileron is higher than that of the endosperm proteins. The lysine content of the germ proteins is some 2 to 2.5 times greater than in the proteins of the aileron. Now, lipids. Lipids are present to the extent of 1 to 2% in wheat, rice, rye and barley, 3% in maize and 4 to 6% in oats. More lipids are present in germ and bran than in other parts of the grain. For example, wheat germ contains 6 to 11% lipids, bran 3 to 5% and endosperm 0.8 to 1.5%. Similarly, the lipid content of maize germ is 35% and the bran contains 1% lipid. The lipids are mostly the triglycerides of palmitic, oleic and linoleic acids. Cereals also contain the phospholipid lecithin. The lipids in milled cereal products undergo two types of deterioration: hydrolysis due to the action of enzyme lipase present in the grain and oxidation by the action of enzyme lipoxygenase or non-enzymatically in the presence of oxygen. These changes give rise to unpleasant flavors. When the germ is separated from the endosperm, as in the milling of cereals, the keeping quality of the milled products is improved. Now, minerals. The husks of the cereal caryopsis of rice, barley and rye are rich in minerals. The ash content of rice husk being 22.5% and the ash containing mostly silica 96%. The kernels of these cereals and those of naked caryopsis also contain minerals, about 95% of them being the phosphates and sulfates of potassium, magnesium and calcium. A considerable part of phosphorus in cereals is present in the form of phytin, the calcium magnesium salt of phytic acid, that is inositol hexaphosphoric acid. Phosphorus and calcium present in phytin are not available for absorption. Some mineral elements like copper, zinc, manganese and iron are also present in very small quantities in cereals, oats being particularly rich in iron. Rye and oats have highest calcium content of all cereals. Now vitamins. B group vitamins are present in all cereals, more or less to the same extent, except niacin, which is more in wheat, barley, rice and sorghum. The distribution of the vitamins in different grains and in different parts of the same grain is not uniform. Oils from cereal grains are rich in vitamin E. Now enzymes. Cereal grains contain many enzymes, and of these the amylases, proteases, lipases and oxidoreductases are of importance from the point of view of cereal technology. Ungerminated wheat, barley and rye have beta amylase activity but exhibit no alpha amylase activity. The proteases are relatively more in the germ. The lipases of cereals are responsible for the fatty acids appearing during the storage of cereals and their products. Now, nutritive value. The nutritive value of cereals depend on their chemical composition. The composition of processed cereals is different from that of the whole grain. As the nutrients of cereals are not uniformly distributed in the grain, milled products like bran, germ, flour and grits vary considerably in composition according to the type and extent of milling to which they are subjected. The nutritive value also depends on the nature of the processed product. Now, cereal processing. Cereal processing represents an important part of the food production chain, but the contribution of cereals to the non-food sector should not be overlooked. Milling represents the principal procedure in the cereal industry and is classified into two categories, dry and wet, while each has its own characteristics. Now, dry milling. Dry milling separates the outer fibrous materials and germ, which are considered byproducts of grain endosperm. Dry milling can also refer to purling, which is an abrasive technique that gradually removes the seed coat, that is testa and pericarp, aileron and sub-aileron layers, and the germ to obtain polished grain in terms of rice, oat and barley, and byproducts with high concentration of bioactive compounds. Wheat milling. Wheat milling is mainly used for the production of starch and gluten, having as co-products steep solids, rich in nutrients, valuable for pharmaceutical industry, germ, which is intended for oil crushing industry, and bran. Malting is a process intended for the production of beer and other alcoholic beverages when fermentable sugars and starch of the grain are consumed by enzymes leaving behind spent grain. Now, cereal processing byproducts. During the milling process, bran, germ and the endospermic tissue aileron layer are removed from cereal grain and comprise the dry milling byproducts. These grain fractions are a rich source of biofunctional molecules, fiber, minerals, vitamins, lignans, phytoestrogens and phenolic compounds. Depending on the milling process, dry or wet milling, the final nutritional value of the byproduct varies greatly. Therefore, the fractions obtained during dry or wet milling can find many applications in food and non-food products apart from use only as feed. Malting, brewing and distilling of cereals are processes that result in various byproducts that are becoming very attractive raw materials for other industries. Now let us summarize. The term cereals refers to members of the Poaceae family and determines the nine species: wheat, rye, barley, oat, rice, millet, corn, sorghum, and triticale, which is a hybrid of wheat and rye. Wheat, oats, maize, and sorghum are said to be naked grains called caryopsis. In the case of rice, oats, some varieties of barley, and sorghum, the lemma and pallia adhere to the grain and do not come away during threshing. Thus, these grains are covered or coated caryopsis. The seed comprises the seed coat, germ, and endosperm. Carbohydrates are the major constituents comprising about 80% of the dry matter of the cereals. As the nutrients of cereals are not uniformly distributed in the grain, milled products like bran, germ, flour, and grits vary considerably in composition according to the type and extent of milling to which they are subjected. Cereal processing represents an important part of food production chain. Milling represents the principal procedure in the cereal industry and is classified into two categories, dry and wet, while each has its own characteristics. Malting, brewing, and distilling of cereals are processes that result in various byproducts that are becoming very attractive raw materials for other industries. These are the references. With this, we have come to an end of lecture on structure, composition, and milling of cereals. Thank you.